Welcome back to The Point. There used to be a saying in Shanghai that even a single bed in Puxi is preferable to a whole apartment in Pudong, back when Pudong was mostly farmlands. But in the last 30 years, Pudong has become one of China's most prosperous districts. What are the secrets of its success, and will the Pudong miracle continue? Joining me from Geneva, Xiankun, Emeritus Professor at the University of International Business and Economics, and from Shanghai, Domenico Palumbo, former Vice President of the Tianjin branch of the world's oldest gastronomic society, the Shenda Horesu. Pardon my French there. Gentlemen, welcome to the program. Let me begin with you, Professor Liu. Some foreign observers used to say that socialism does not work and that there are problems simply in the relationship between government and the market. But what we've seen is that despite that skepticism, Pudong has developed spectacularly as you have lived outside China for many years. Help us understand, Professor, why people thought this way, especially when the entire country's progress is clear.
Thank you for that question. I studied in Shanghai, and I always go back to Shanghai every year, so I do see how Pudong developed itself from, in the past, as you said, a farmland into now a very prosperous region. The suspicion of the international community on how China is going to push forward or not pushing forward is opening up and reform, or Chinese systemic difference may handicap China's reform and opening up is not a new story. If you look back at how Pudong was proposed in 1990, that was exactly a kind of a critical moment after 1989. There was a huge pervasive suspicion by the international community on whether China is going to push forward that reform. That's when Deng Xiaoping supported the Shanghai local initiative to open up Pudong, especially on the institutional part. So that was a big signal to respond to that suspicion. And in 2005, the China specifically set up Pudong also as the so-called pilot zone for the overall reform, specifically targeting about the overall systemic reform and also regulatory opening up and reform. So that's what's peculiar about Pudong. Now we are again at this critical moment, because with China's rise, with China's consolidation of its systemic advantages, the international community once again are debating on how China is going to push forward its opening up and reform.
Mr. Palumbo, we've talked to many people in Shanghai about the topic of Pudong, and for them, the transformative development is not just in numbers. They see it with their own eyes. And since we're talking about the secrets behind Pudong's success today, many say that a competitive edge lies in the talent pool in Shanghai, and in Pudong in particular, with over 200,000 expats. Shanghai is home to the largest community of foreign workers in China. On a personal note, what appeals to you about Shanghai, and why did you decide to live there?
Thank you for your question. Well, to answer it in just one word, I would say it was a no-brainer. Working in hospitality industry, it gives me the opportunity to see many new places. For me, in my personal case, has been in China. I've been to many places working in China, but at the same time, it gives pressure to the family who have to be following me to different places and to meet different people. So back 15 years ago, after already being in China for a few years and moving to a few places, my family and I decided to basically choose a place, choose a city that, you know, for basically settling down and call it home, a city that we can call home. So choosing Shanghai at that time, it was a no-brainer, because again, I'm Italian, so our Italian family culture is very much similar, I believe, to the Chinese family culture. And when looking at a place to settle down for long term, so we look at, number one, of course, we look at somewhere suitable for our children, which is, of course, number one, it's education. Number two is healthcare. So, and I think Shanghai at that time, and even, of course, now even more and more, it was, you know, the best China had to offer.
Mr. Lu, let me come to you now. I want to get your thoughts on the context of developing the Yangtze River Economic Belt. I want to put the development, the future of Pudong, in that context now, as President Xi mentioned the need to achieve breakthroughs in key technologies in both of his recent speeches in the area. It is an echo of the key areas and stranglehold problems policy on which China has been focusing in recent years. Professor, by tapping into the Yangtze River Economic Belt's existing resources, what key areas can we focus on going forward, and what kind of breakthroughs could be achieved?
I think President Xi, in his speech, there are two words worth mentioning. The first one is synergy. The second one is the leading role, or in Chinese language, dragon-head role, to spread out its reform effects from Shanghai to other areas. So the synergy exactly talks about that Pudong should lead the whole kind of reform and opening up in Yangtze River Economic Zone, as well as the whole China, and of course to play that kind of dragon-head role. I think technology innovation, of course, is important, but another even more important aspect is what Xi has repeatedly emphasized in his speeches about this institutional and regulatory reform and opening up, and to targeting the highest standards and the highest level. I think that's exactly what is lying in the next step of Chinese deepening reform, the hardcore things. If Shanghai and Pudong could play that role in pushing forward that aspects of reform, I think that could immediately spread even bigger effects to Yangtze River and also other part of China, and which of course would push forward China's overall reform and opening up. I think that's exactly where he's emphasizing. Yeah.
Prior to his trip in Shanghai, the Chinese president visited Shenzhen in mid-October. Both Shenzhen and Shanghai have been at the forefront of China's reform and opening up. And when people look at those two big cities, they wonder what is the unique strategic positioning of Shanghai and of Pudong compared to Shenzhen. Help us understand how the future development of Shanghai and the future positioning of Shanghai differs from not just Shenzhen, but other cities in China.
I think both Pudong and Shenzhen has been playing and will continue to play a kind of leading role in pushing forward China's reform and opening up, especially on the globalized picture. I think they both have each other's specific advantages and also probably somewhere to improve. Talking about Pudong, I think Pudong, as you have mentioned, is located in the Yangtze River Economic Zone, and which of course is one of the most dynamic, economically most dynamic area in the whole China. So as to, it provides a huge hinterland for Pudong's further development, and which could bring, of course, a lot of reform and opening up potentiality as well as dividends. That's for sure. But on the other hand, I think in terms of this global participation, and I think Shanghai still needs to make further efforts, especially about innovation, institutional reform, sustainable competitiveness. And if you look at the Global Urban Competitiveness Report recently published by the UN Habitat and China Academy of Social Science, Shanghai actually ranked 29, falling behind actually Shenzhen, which is number 19. So I think that's where Pudong needs to really make further efforts to do in the future.
Now let's end on those tips and suggestions from Professor Lu. Thank you so much for joining me, Domenico Palumbo and Professor Lu. With that, we come to the end of this edition of The Point. As always, follow us on Facebook and Twitter using the handle Lucian in Beijing, and download the CGTN app to watch our show, or go to YouTube and look for CGTN The Point. I'm Zhong Shi. Thank you so much for the privilege of your time.